Have you ever given everything to someone only to have them turn their back on you when you needed them most? That kind of wound doesn't leave scars on your skin. It leaves invisible marks etched deep into your soul, the kind that ache in the quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts. This is the story of a noble eagle who learned a painful truth about trust, about sacrifice, and about the dangerous line between compassion and self-destruction. Never place your dignity in the hands of someone who doesn't know how to value it. Before we begin, if you're the kind of person who believes in growth, in learning from life's hardest lessons, then join this community. Hit that subscribe button, and let's walk this journey together. High above the valley, where the mountains kissed the clouds and the wind carried ancient whispers from peak to peak, there lived an eagle, unlike any other. She wasn't the typical bird of prey who hunted with cold calculation or killed for the simple thrill of dominance. Her talons and her wings served necessity, not cruelty. She was powerful, feared by many, and respected by those who truly understood her nature. But within her golden eyes burned something different, a heart that understood the real meaning of honor, of protecting rather than destroying. Every morning, as she spread her wings and soared toward the rising sun, the eagle remembered the words her mother had spoken before her final flight. A noble heart is not measured by the fear it inspires in others, but by the lives it chooses to protect, even when protection comes at great personal cost. That teaching had become her compass, the internal voice that guided her through storms and clear skies alike, even when hunger gnawed at her belly and instinct screamed at her to be like the others, to take what she wanted, to rule through terror, to never question the natural order of predator and prey. But that nobility, that choice to be different, came with a price steeper than she'd ever imagined. It made her walk through the skies in profound solitude, always watching from a distance, always separate from the community she secretly longed to be part of. The creatures of the valley looked up at her with fearful eyes because they could still see the sharpness of her beak, the deadly curve of her talons. They couldn't see past the surface to understand that she had chosen a different path. The eagle would perch on the highest cliff and observe the world below with a mixture of longing and resignation. She watched rabbits playing in meadows painted with wildflowers, their laughter carried on the breeze. She saw birds gathering in great flocks, celebrating the dawn with songs so beautiful they made her chest ache. She observed deer moving together in families, protecting their young, never alone, always surrounded by their own kind. And sometimes, in the deepest hours of night, when even the stars seemed to mock her isolation, she thought to herself, "They all have each other. They have their tribes and their families, their connections and their communities. And I have only myself. Only this solitude that weighs heavier than any storm cloud." That reflection cut deep because, just like many of us discover in our own lives, she was learning that being good, that choosing integrity over ease, doesn't always lead to acceptance. Sometimes it leads to the loneliest path imaginable. The eagle's isolation wasn't just physical, it was existential, a separation that went far beyond the simple fact of being alone. She carried within her a fundamental contradiction that she couldn't resolve no matter how many miles she flew or how many sunrises she witnessed. She was powerful enough to be dangerous, yet she chose gentleness. She was feared enough to command respect, yet she craved understanding. She was capable of taking life, yet she devoted herself to preserving it. This internal conflict created a barrier between her and every other creature in the valley. A wall built not of malice, but of misunderstanding, not of hatred, but of fear. Every evening, when the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson, the eagle would return to her nest, a solitary structure built on the most remote cliff face where few dared to venture. There, surrounded by nothing but wind and silence, she would settle her wings and look out over the vast expanse of wilderness stretching before her. The vista was breathtaking, a masterpiece of nature's artistry, but its beauty only amplified her loneliness. She could see everything and everyone, but she was separated from it all by an invisible boundary that her noble heart had somehow created. She often wondered if this was the price all good souls paid, if choosing to be better meant choosing to be alone. The other eagles in distant territories lived differently. They ruled through intimidation, took what they wanted without question, and never bothered themselves with concepts like mercy or compassion. They had mates, territories they defended viciously, and a place in the natural hierarchy that made sense to everyone. But this eagle, with her mother's words still echoing in her mind, couldn't bring herself to live that way. She couldn't hunt the weak for sport. She couldn't ignore a creature in distress. She couldn't turn her powerful wings toward cruelty, when everything inside her screamed for something higher, something more meaningful than simple survival and dominance. And so she remained alone, not because she wanted to be, but because the world hadn't made space for someone like her, someone who refused to fit the mold that nature had supposedly cast. The valley creatures whispered about her in hushed tones, creating legends and myths that transformed her into something she wasn't. Some called her the guardian of the peaks, a mystical protector who watched over the valley. Others said she was touched by madness, a predator who had forgotten her true nature. But none of them truly knew her. None of them understood that behind those fierce golden eyes was a heart that felt deeply, that ached with empathy, that struggled every single day with the weight of being different. She wanted connection, wanted to be understood, wanted someone to see past her talons and her beak, to recognize the gentle spirit within. But wanting and receiving are two entirely different things, and the eagle was learning that lesson in the hardest way possible. Among all the inhabitants of the valley, there lived a young rabbit named Henry. He had soft gray fur that turned almost silver in the moonlight, and eyes that were perpetually wide with worry, always scanning the horizon for danger that he was convinced lurked everywhere. Henry wasn't like the other rabbits who seemed to navigate life with an ease that mystified him. While they hopped through meadows with carefree abandon, he moved with calculated caution, always staying close to the nearest burrow, always ready to bolt at the slightest unusual sound. Though he ran with his warren, he always lagged behind, consumed by fears that his fellow rabbits didn't seem to share, or at least didn't show. Henry carried his own invisible wound, a deep-seated insecurity that had taken root in his heart from his earliest days. He was convinced he wasn't fast enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't strong enough to survive in a world that seemed designed to prey upon weakness. Every rustle of leaves made his heart race with terror. Every shadow that passed overhead sent him diving for cover. Every moment of peace was just the calm before an inevitable storm. He lived in a constant state of anxiety, always waiting for disaster to strike, always believing that he was somehow less capable than those around him, that his weaknesses would ultimately be his undoing. The other rabbits in his warren tried to reassure him, tried to tell him that he was being too hard on himself, that survival wasn't about being the fastest or the strongest, but about being smart and cautious. But their words never truly reached him. Fear had such a strong grip on Henry's heart that logic couldn't penetrate it. He saw danger where others saw opportunity. He felt terror where others felt curiosity. And most painfully, he felt inadequate in situations where others felt confident. This constant state of fear didn't just exhaust him, it isolated him, created a barrier between him and genuine connection because he was always too worried about survival to truly engage with life. What Henry didn't realize, what he couldn't see through the fog of his own anxiety, was that his greatest weakness wasn't his lack of speed or strength. It was his inability to trust, his unwillingness to believe that anyone could truly help him without expecting something in return. He had built walls around his heart, walls made of fear and self-doubt, and those walls would soon be tested in ways he never imagined. Two creatures so different, a noble eagle with a heart full of compassion and a terrified rabbit with a soul full of insecurity, were about to have their destinies intertwine in a way that would teach them both lessons about the true meaning of worth, of trust, and of the dangerous territory between giving everything and protecting yourself. Dawn broke over the valley with unusual intensity that morning, painting everything in shades of gold and orange that seemed almost too vibrant to be real. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of wildflowers and morning dew, and for a brief moment, everything seemed peaceful. Birds began their morning chorus, small creatures emerged from their burrows to greet the new day, and the world appeared to be in perfect harmony with itself. But beneath that surface tranquility, danger was approaching with silent, calculated steps. A hunter had entered the valley. This wasn't a natural predator following the ancient rhythms of survival. This was a man with a rifle slung over his shoulder and traps hanging from his belt, walking with the determined stride of someone who saw nature not as a community to respect, but as resources to exploit. His eyes scanned the landscape with cold efficiency, looking for tracks, for signs, for anything that could become his trophy. His presence was an intrusion, a violation of the valley's natural balance, and the very air seemed to grow tense with the wrongness of it. Henry was foraging near the edge of the meadow when he first sensed something was wrong. The morning had been going well. He'd found fresh clover and had almost managed to relax for a moment. But then he heard it. The metallic click of a safety being released, the subtle crunch of boots on dry grass, the unmistakable scent of human that made every instinct in his body scream danger. He froze, every muscle in his small body tensing with terror. His mind raced with panic. He tried to run, but fear had paralyzed his legs. His breathing came in short, desperate gasps. His eyes darted frantically, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. The hunter was too close, had positioned himself too perfectly. Henry was trapped, and in that moment of absolute terror, his mind could only form one desperate question. Why me? Why now? Why does it always have to end like this? High above, perched on her usual cliff, the eagle had been watching the sunrise when she noticed the disturbance. Her keen eyes immediately identified the threat, the human with his weapons, the rabbit frozen in fear, the inevitable tragedy about to unfold. Every logical part of her mind told her to stay out of it. This was nature's way, wasn't it? The strong survived, the weak perished. That rabbit had always looked at her with suspicion anyway, had never shown her anything but fear, had certainly never tried to understand her or see past her predatory appearance. Why should she risk everything for a creature that had never acknowledged her existence except to fear it? But then something deeper than logic, something more powerful than self-preservation, spoke within her chest. The eagle understood what it meant to live with fear. Even though she was strong and formidable, she knew the loneliness of not being accepted, of carrying an identity that others rejected without ever trying to understand the heart beneath. And seeing Henry there, so small and fragile and absolutely terrified, she felt something shift inside her. She couldn't just watch. She couldn't let fear or past rejection or logical self-interest stop her from doing what her heart knew was right. She had two choices in that moment. She could stay safe, protect herself, avoid risk, and continue her solitary existence. Or she could risk everything for a creature who would probably never understand her sacrifice, who might never even acknowledge what she was about to do. The eagle chose the harder path. With a piercing cry that echoed across the entire valley, she launched herself from the cliff, wings spread wide, diving with breathtaking speed toward the hunter. The man's attention snapped upward in shock as this massive bird of prey came screaming toward him from the sky. The eagle didn't attack. She didn't need to. She swooped and circled, creating a spectacle of movement and sound that completely diverted the hunter's focus. He raised his rifle toward her, tracking her movements, forgetting entirely about the rabbit that had been his original target. The eagle led him away, using her agility and speed to stay just out of range, drawing him deeper into the forest, further from Henry. And in that chaos, in that moment when all attention was focused elsewhere, Henry's paralyzed legs finally remembered how to move. He ran. He ran faster than he'd ever run before, his small body a blur of motion as he zigzagged through the underbrush, putting distance between himself and the danger, not stopping until his lungs burned and his legs trembled and he was finally, miraculously safe. The eagle, seeing that her mission was accomplished, made one final daring pass near the hunter before soaring up and away, disappearing into the vastness of the sky before the man could even think about taking a shot. When the immediate danger had passed and Henry's heart had finally slowed from its frantic pounding to something resembling normal rhythm, he found himself in a small clearing far from where the encounter had occurred. He was alive. He was whole. He was safe. And none of that would have been possible without the intervention of the eagle he had always feared, always avoided, always seen as just another threat to his survival. The realization hit him like a physical force, leaving him breathless all over again. Later that evening, as the eagle returned to her cliff to rest after the day's excitement, she found Henry waiting nervously at a respectful distance. The rabbit's entire body trembled. Whether from residual fear or emotion, she couldn't tell. But he had come, had sought her out, had made the effort to express something he clearly felt deeply. His voice was barely above a whisper when he finally spoke. "Thank you. You saved my life today. I don't know why you did it, but thank you." The words were simple, but they carried weight, and for a moment the eagle felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not pride exactly, but a sense of purpose fulfilled, of knowing she had made the right choice even when it had been dangerous. She looked at him with those golden eyes that had seen so much, that carried so much wisdom and sadness. "Guard your freedom well, Henry," she said softly. "Today it belongs to you because I chose to defend it. Don't waste it on fear." In that moment, something strange and almost impossible came into being, a connection between predator and prey, a bond that defied every natural law and social expectation. A bird who should have been a threat had become a protector. Gratitude seemed to unite them, creating a fragile bridge across the chasm that nature had placed between their species. But even in that moment of connection, even as Henry felt genuine thankfulness flood through him, there was something else lurking beneath the surface. Doubt, fear, the old familiar anxiety that he could never quite escape. Because fear doesn't disappear just because someone shows you kindness. Fear is persistent, stubborn, deeply rooted, even when someone gives you their very best, even when they risk everything for you. The voice of fear continues to whisper its poison. And Henry heard that voice clearly. What will the other rabbits think if they see you associating with an eagle? How can you trust someone who, by every law of nature, should be your mortal enemy? What if this is all some elaborate trick? What if she's just waiting for the right moment to... And there was the contradiction that would haunt their brief relationship. The eagle had given everything for Henry. Her safety, her energy, her very life had been on the line. But Henry, trapped in his own insecurity and fear, still couldn't fully accept what had been offered. He couldn't see himself as worthy of walking alongside her, couldn't imagine that someone so powerful would help him without ulterior motives, couldn't trust that goodness could exist without strings attached. Sometimes in life, this same pattern plays out in our own relationships. Someone offers us genuine support, risks something important for our benefit, extends a hand in true friendship, but our fear, our insecurities, or the voices of society tell us to reject what we should treasure. And it's in that space between gratitude and trust that the real conflict begins, not with external enemies, but within the chambers of our own doubtful hearts. Days passed after the rescue, and the valley seemed to settle back into its familiar rhythms. Birds sang their eternal songs, the stream flowed with its constant music, and creatures went about their daily business of survival and community. The eagle continued her solitary patrols, but there was something different now. A small warmth in her chest when she thought about Henry, a tiny hope that maybe, just maybe, her act of kindness had opened a door to something more than loneliness. She had done the right thing. She had protected a life, even knowing she would receive nothing in return. But knowing you did the right thing and feeling satisfied with solitude are two very different experiences. But the hunter's footsteps hadn't faded from the valley. The man had returned, and this time his mission was personal. He wasn't just looking for any prey. He was searching specifically for the eagle who had humiliated him, who had made him look foolish, who had dared to interfere with his hunt. This wasn't about sport or survival anymore. This was about wounded pride, about proving that no animal could defy him and escape consequences. The hunter moved through the forest with methodical precision, examining disturbed earth and broken branches, tracking patterns of flight, learning the eagle's habits with obsessive focus. And then, the unthinkable happened. Henry, trembling and anxious as always, encountered the hunter near the stream. The man looked at the small rabbit with calculating eyes, and in that moment, he made an offer that spoke directly to Henry's deepest fears. "Tell me where the eagle nests," the hunter said quietly, "and I'll leave your warren alone. I'll leave this entire valley. All I want is that bird. Give me what I want, and you and yours will be safe." The words hung in the air like poison, offering Henry exactly what his fear-dominated heart craved most: safety, security, the promise that danger would pass him by. Henry's mind raced with justifications. He told himself that the eagle was strong, that she could probably escape anyway, that it wasn't really his responsibility to protect her just because she had protected him. He convinced himself that his family and his warren mattered more than one solitary bird. He rationalized that survival required hard choices, that in nature you had to look out for yourself first. But beneath all those logical-sounding excuses was a simpler, uglier truth. Henry was afraid, and fear was making him betray the one creature who had shown him genuine, selfless kindness. His voice barely audible, Henry whispered the location. "The high cliff near the waterfall. That's where she nests." The hunter's lips curved into a cruel smile. He needed nothing more. With mechanical efficiency, he began preparing his trap, a net system designed specifically for birds of prey, positioned perfectly near the eagle's nest, hidden among the rocks where she wouldn't see it until it was too late. That afternoon, as golden sunlight filtered through the clouds and painted the valley in warm hues, the eagle returned home after a long day of flying. She felt the wind in her feathers, the solid comfort of the cliff beneath her talons, and for just a moment, she allowed herself to believe that the valley had become her refuge again, that perhaps the danger had passed. But then, without warning, she felt something snap around her wings. The net descended with brutal efficiency, wrapping around her body, tangling her wings, dragging her down onto the hard rock with violent force. She cried out, a sound of shock and pain that echoed across the entire valley. The physical agony was intense. The ropes cut into her wings, the weight restricted her breath, the hard stone bruised her body. But none of that compared to what she felt when she lifted her head and saw, in the distance, partially hidden behind a tree, the unmistakable shape of Henry. He was there, watching in silence. His eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and shame. He didn't speak, didn't approach, didn't try to help or explain. He just stood there like a cowardly witness to suffering he had caused, too paralyzed by his own guilt to do anything useful. The eagle understood everything in that moment. No words were necessary. No confession was required. The creature she had risked her life to save had delivered her to her potential death. Her heart didn't just break. It shattered. Not because of the trap, not because of the physical pain, but because of the betrayal. "I risked everything for you," she thought, struggling against the ropes that held her. "I put my life on the line, and you repaid my loyalty with chains. I gave you freedom, and you responded by taking mine." And in that terrible realization, the eagle discovered a truth that many of us learn only through our most painful experiences. Often, it's not our enemies who hurt us most deeply, but those we chose to trust, those we extended ourselves for, those we believed would understand the value of what we gave. Henry stood frozen in his hiding place, unable to meet her gaze. The eagle, her breathing labored and her body aching, thought to herself, "It's not my body that's trapped here. It's my dignity that's being tested, my very sense of self-worth that's being challenged." In that silence, with the net cutting into her wings and betrayal poisoning her heart, the entire valley seemed to whisper a lesson that applies to all of us. Not everyone who receives your help will know how to appreciate it. Not everyone you protect will be capable of protecting you in return. Sometimes the greatest danger comes not from our known enemies, but from those we mistakenly believed were friends. Night fell over the valley like a heavy curtain, covering everything in darkness, so complete it seemed almost suffocating. The eagle remained trapped, her breathing shallow with pain, her wings bound by unforgiving rope, her heart heavy with a weight far greater than any physical burden. The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying with it sounds of the forest's nighttime symphony, a symphony she might never hear again if the hunter returned at dawn. The stars emerged one by one, distant and cold, offering light but no warmth, no comfort, no answers to the questions burning in her mind. From the shadows of a nearby pine tree, a shape emerged. An old raven, his feathers dark as midnight, his eyes bright with the wisdom of countless seasons. He descended on silent wings and perched near the trapped eagle, regarding her with a gaze that seemed to see not just her present suffering, but all the choices and chances that had led her to this moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and measured, each word carrying the weight of hard-won understanding. Eagle, do not torture yourself over someone who cannot appreciate what you are. Your mistake was not in helping, that was noble and right. Your mistake was in expecting loyalty from a heart ruled entirely by fear. Real strength is not measured by what we give to others, but by refusing to lose our dignity when others prove incapable of returning what we offer. The words penetrated her pain like medicine, bitter but necessary, uncomfortable but true. The raven watched her process his message, patient as only ancient creatures can be, waiting for understanding to take root. And in that moment of stillness, with the rope still cutting into her wings and shame still burning in her chest, Henry appeared. He emerged from the darkness, with tears streaming down his small face, his entire body shaking with emotion that he could no longer contain. His voice broke as he spoke. "Forgive me. Please, I just wanted to survive. I didn't think about what you did for me. I only thought about myself." The eagle looked at him for a long moment, and in her golden eyes a complex storm of emotions swirled: anger, pain, disappointment, but also, surprisingly, compassion. Because even in her suffering, even with every reason to hate him, she couldn't completely extinguish the empathy that had always defined her. "You betrayed my trust, Henry," she said, her voice rough with emotion. "You took my sacrifice and threw it away the moment your own fear returned. But I won't carry hatred in my heart. That poison would only trap me more surely than these ropes ever could. So yes, I forgive you." Henry lowered his head, overwhelmed by shame, and perhaps, for the first time, beginning to understand the magnitude of what he'd done, the value of what he'd destroyed. In the silence of the valley night, with the stars as witnesses, it seemed as though maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of real understanding, the start of genuine change. The raven remained silent, watching with eyes that had seen this story play out 1,000 times before, in 1,000 different forms. Several days passed. Through the combined help of other valley creatures who had witnessed the eagle's plight, creatures who had never stopped to consider her kindness before, but who now saw her true nature, the trapped bird managed to free herself from the hunter's net. Her wings were damaged, but not broken. Her body was bruised, but would heal. She thought perhaps the worst was behind her, that the lesson had been learned, that Henry's tears and apologies had been genuine indicators of change. When they encountered each other again near the stream, the eagle wanted to believe in redemption. She wanted to think that her forgiveness had meant something, that her compassion had touched something real in Henry's fearful heart. The rabbit seemed different, more attentive, more grateful, more aware of what had nearly been lost. For a few precious days, it appeared that maybe nobility could triumph, that maybe her mother's teachings about protecting life and showing mercy had been vindicated after all. But life has a cruel way of teaching us lessons we refuse to learn the first time. When danger appeared again, this time in the form of a fox prowling the valley's edge, Henry's true nature revealed itself once more. The moment fear gripped his heart, the moment his survival instinct overrode everything else, he made the same choice. He told the fox where the eagle could be found. He traded her safety for his own. He proved that his apologies had been born of guilt and shame, not genuine transformation. When the eagle discovered this second betrayal, when she narrowly escaped the fox only to realize that Henry had once again sold her out, something inside her fundamentally changed. The pain was deeper this time because she had allowed herself to hope, had permitted herself to believe in the possibility of change. The raven's earlier words echoed in her mind with new urgency and meaning. She understood now what he had been trying to tell her. A noble heart can forgive, yes, but it must also learn to protect itself. There are some who will never change, and clinging to them, continuing to expose yourself to their repeated failures, is not compassion. It's self-destruction. The raven, appearing again as if summoned by her realization, spoke with gentle firmness. Eagle, self-love is not about hardening your heart or becoming cruel. It's about understanding that your dignity is not negotiable, that it's not up for auction every time someone's fear makes them weak. You can be compassionate without being a doormat for ingratitude. Remember this truth. When someone fails you once, it might be a mistake, a moment of weakness. But when they fail you twice, they're showing you their true character. Believe them. The eagle lifted her head, and in her eyes was a new understanding. Not bitterness exactly, but clarity. She was no longer just carrying pain. She was carrying wisdom. Her worth didn't depend on whether Henry or anyone else appreciated her. Her nobility wasn't diminished by his inability to reciprocate it. She was who she was, a creature of honor and strength, regardless of whether others recognized or valued that truth. With tremendous effort and no small amount of pain, the eagle finally freed herself completely from the last entanglement with those who didn't value her. Each movement was agony, each stretch of her damaged wings a reminder of the price she had paid for trusting the wrong heart. But as she pulled herself free and stood on solid ground once more, something profound shifted inside her. The wounds on her body would heal with time, but the wound in her trust had taught her something more valuable than physical recovery. It had taught her about boundaries, about the difference between compassion and self-sacrifice, about the crucial importance of protecting your own heart while still choosing to be good. She stood there in the fading light of evening, her feathers ruffled and torn but her spine straight, her spirit battered but somehow stronger than before. She looked up at the sky, at the vast expanse of freedom that was still hers despite everything, and she understood with crystal clarity what she had been missing all along. Not everyone deserves your loyalty. Not everyone will know how to value an act of love or sacrifice. Some hearts are so consumed by fear, so controlled by self-interest, so incapable of reciprocity that they will never, can never, recognize the gift you're offering them. The eagle realized that her nobility, her choice to be kind, to protect, to act with honor, had never been the problem. Being good had not been her mistake. Her error had been in giving her trust to someone who wasn't ready to receive it, in placing her peace in the hands of someone who didn't know how to hold it carefully. I will continue to be noble, she thought, her heart settling into a new kind of calm. I will not let Henry's failures turn me bitter or cruel, but I will never again place my dignity in someone else's hands, because those who cannot value what you offer do not deserve to keep it. That realization made her stronger than any amount of physical power ever could. For the first time, she truly understood that self-love wasn't pride or selfishness. It was protection. It was learning to set boundaries even when your nature wants to forgive and trust again. It was recognizing that you can be compassionate without being a victim, that you can be kind without being a fool, that you can offer help without making yourself available for endless exploitation. As she began to walk, each step painful but purposeful, she felt something shifting in her core identity. Yes, she carried scars now, both visible and invisible, but those scars spoke of lessons learned, of strength earned, of a harder kind of wisdom that only comes through betrayal and survival. She understood now that she couldn't allow other people's failures to define her value. The fact that Henry had betrayed her didn't mean she was wrong to help him. It meant he wasn't ready for the gift she had given. The true transformation wasn't about becoming hard or closed off. It was about learning to choose wisely where to place your trust, about recognizing that your goodness is precious and should be offered to those who will honor it, not wasted on those who will throw it away the moment fear whispers in their ear. She would continue to be herself, would continue to act with honor, but she would do so with eyes wide open, with boundaries firmly in place, with a clear understanding that being noble meant protecting your own heart as well as protecting others. The eagle lifted her gaze to the heavens and released a cry that was long and deep and resonant with new understanding. It wasn't a cry of pain or defeat. It was a declaration. The entire valley seemed to pause and listen, as if recognizing that something significant had shifted, that this sound carried a different quality than her previous calls. In that cry was pain, yes, but there was also freedom. The freedom of a heart that had finally learned that goodness must be honored but never should be placed in the hands of those who cannot care for it properly. From that day forward, the eagle flew with her head held high. The wounds on her wings reminded her of the betrayal, but they also reminded her of the most valuable lesson she had ever learned. Never sacrifice your dignity for someone who cannot recognize your value. The pain had been real. The betrayal had cut deep. But she had emerged from that fire transformed, refined, stronger in the places where she had been broken. She still flew over the valley, still watched the creatures below with her keen golden eyes, still felt the pull of compassion when she saw someone in danger. Her nature hadn't changed. She was still noble, still capable of great kindness, still moved by the desire to protect rather than destroy. But now she flew with wisdom alongside her compassion. She had learned to assess not just whether someone needed help, but whether they were capable of receiving it with gratitude, whether they had the character to honor what was given, whether they possessed the strength to be worthy of the risk she would take. Henry remained in the valley, carrying his own burden of shame and regret. He had learned too late what he had lost, understood too slowly what he had destroyed. Sometimes the eagle would see him from high above, a small gray shape moving cautiously through the meadow, still ruled by fear, still unable to transcend the limitations of his own anxious heart. She felt no hatred toward him. Hatred would have given him power over her that he didn't deserve. Instead, she felt something closer to pity mixed with acceptance. He was what he was, and she had learned to accept that some creatures cannot rise above their nature, cannot move past their fear to become something greater. The eagle found that her solitude felt different now. It was still solitude. She still flew alone, still nested apart from others, still lived outside the normal patterns of her species. But it was no longer lonely solitude. It was chosen solitude, dignified solitude, the peaceful separateness of someone who knows their own worth and doesn't need constant validation from others to confirm it. She had learned that being alone is not the same as being lonely, that solitude can be strength rather than punishment, that sometimes the highest form of self-love is choosing to be selective about who you allow into your inner world. When new creatures entered the valley, when situations arose that called for help, the eagle still responded with her characteristic nobility. But she responded wisely now, helping those who showed genuine gratitude, protecting those who demonstrated they understood the value of what she offered, extending herself for those who had the capacity to honor her sacrifice. She had learned to read hearts better, to distinguish between those who were temporarily afraid and those who were fundamentally selfish, to recognize the difference between someone struggling with fear and someone using fear as an excuse for betrayal. Other eagles began to notice her, drawn by the quiet strength that radiated from her presence. They saw in her something they had never encountered before. A predator who was powerful without being cruel, noble without being naive, kind without being weak. Slowly, carefully, she began to form connections with creatures who could match her level of integrity, who understood that true strength lies not in domination, but in choosing when to extend yourself and when to protect your boundaries. The valley itself seemed to respond to her transformation. Word spread about the eagle who had learned wisdom through pain, who had been betrayed but had not become bitter, who had been wounded but had not lost her nobility. Younger creatures began to seek her out, not with fear, but with respect, asking for her guidance, learning from her example. She became what her mother had always hoped she would become, not just a protector, but a teacher, showing others that it's possible to maintain your goodness while also maintaining your dignity. If this story has touched something in your heart, if you've recognized pieces of your own journey in the eagle's transformation, then I want you to know you're not alone. We've all been the eagle at some point, giving everything to someone who couldn't appreciate it, placing our trust in hands that weren't careful with it, learning the painful difference between being kind and being a doormat. Take a moment right now and leave a comment with the phrase, "My dignity is not for sale." Let me know that you understand this lesson, that you're choosing to honor your own worth even as you continue to be good to others. And remember, self-love isn't selfish, it's survival. It's the foundation upon which all healthy relationships are built. You can be compassionate, generous, kind, and helpful while still maintaining boundaries that protect your heart from those who would exploit your goodness. The eagle learned this truth the hard way through betrayal and pain, but you don't have to. You can learn it right now, in this moment, by deciding that while you will continue to be good, you will be strategic about where you place your trust. If you found value in this story, if it made you think differently about your own relationships and boundaries, then join this community of people who are learning to balance compassion with wisdom. Hit that subscribe button, share your own stories in the comments below. Tell us about times when you've had to learn the difference between being kind and being taken advantage of. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Let's build a community where we lift each other up while also teaching each other how to protect our own hearts. The truth is simple but profound. You deserve to be valued. You deserve to have your kindness reciprocated. You deserve relationships where your goodness is honored, not exploited. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where your efforts aren't appreciated, where your sacrifice is taken for granted, remember the eagle's lesson. The problem isn't in what you're giving, but in who you're giving it to. True love, true friendship, true connection begins with loving yourself enough to demand that others treat your heart with the care it deserves. See you in the next story, where we'll continue exploring life's deepest lessons together.